Hello, my name is Paul Craig. I'm a senior consultant with DSI. Thank you for the opportunity to talk about the application and development of this coupled near-field, far-field Propwash model into the EFDC Plus code. I'd like to thank my co-authors and our sponsors, which include the U.S. Navy and ExxonMobil. The phenomena of propeller wash or Propwash has been well studied for many years with various numerical and analytical models developed to predict Propwash. What has been missing in the past, however, is a more complete Propwash analysis package that couples both the near-field jet velocity and shear effects with the larger scale, multidimensional hydrodynamic systems that are typical in harbors and estuaries. So as part of this project, we have developed a propeller wash model that's coupled to the Environmental Fluid Dynamics Code, or EFDC Plus, which is an open source model. We've developed the code in 2019 and 2020 and have been extensively testing the various features and functionality in the system for the latter half of 2020. Now we're applying the model to this test case that we'll be talking about later based on a ferry berthing in Kingston, Washington. The Propwash implementation in the EFDC code is a combination of an analytical solution associated with the Propwash jet and the integration process by which we take the details of the Propwash velocity and shear field and roll it up into the hydrodynamic model. There are the analytical solution selected for this effort is basically variations on Hamel with some other authors, and it published at different times. But it fundamentally falls into three basic velocity zones. A very near zone near the prop called the efflux zone. Then there's a period after the efflux zone, but that's known as the zone of flow establishment, where the jet, it has distinct parts that are associated with the hub and then the propeller blades themselves, and then eventually the fusion of the jet ends up establishing just a single, more kind of Gaussian type distribution of the velocity jet known as the zone of established flow. So how we rolled up the Propwash jet up into the EFDC model is, first off, you have a hydrodynamic model. It's simulating flow in 1, 2, or 3 dimensions depending upon the application. So you end up with this grid, and then we have a subgrid associated with each of the vessels that are being simulated, and any number of vessels can be simulated simultaneously. For each vessel, the velocity field at the subgrid scale is calculated, followed by the bottom shear stress due to Propwash, and then if sediment transport is being simulated, the erosive flux is integrated up from the subgrid scale up to the EFDC scale, where subsequent fate and transport can occur. This process is repeated at every time step, and the resulting sediment transport can be analyzed as with any sediment transport model from that point forward. The application we will be talking about today is the Kingston ferry terminal Slip number 1 has a historic problem associated with scour from the propeller action as the ship both arrives and departs from the ferry terminal. The figure that you see on to the right of the photo shows a time history of the depth of water below mean low or low water at 2 locations behind slip 1 and slip 2. So we're focused here on slip 1, which shows a fairly large-scale erosion event sometime between 2014 to 2016. As can be seen here on this slide, slip 1 receives the majority of the ferry traffic, at least for this particular day that we were focused on, which was March 18th, 2018, during which time there were 23 departures and 23 arrivals in and out of the ferry slip, where most of them were in and out of slip 1. There are 3 different ships or ferries that we were looking at: the Puyallup, the Spokane, and the Walla Walla. Largely the same vessel size. Here on this slide, we see a longitudinal profile of one of the ferries, the Puyallup. You can note that there's a propeller on both ends, and essentially the ferry is symmetrical about the center of the ferry, depending upon the direction of ferry travel as to which bridge and propeller is in operation. The Washington State Department of Transportation collected data at a couple of locations over the period in 2018, basically at the base or near the base of a couple of pilings that we referred to as the north piling and the south piling. They're at the ADVs, or acoustic Doppler velocity meter locations, were installed at different depths, and they're collecting data at a frequency of 16 hertz. You can see from the figure on the right, schematic of the ferry terminal and roughly where the 2 ADVs are located. Time series shown here shows the raw ADV data as the gray dots, a 6-second low-pass filter data set in red, and then the associated tide levels that were measured at the dock. This figure shows the ADV data from the south piling, which was measured at a shallower depth than the north piling. Data here is at minus 5.9 meters. You see 2 obvious differences from the previous slide. One is that the magnitude of the velocity or the jet is higher than it was in the north piling. Secondly, you see a correspondence between jet velocities or peak jet velocities and tide. Interestingly, at higher tide, the jet velocities are generally higher than they are at low tide, and this is all associated with the depth of the propeller, the ship, and the draft as it that velocity jet intersects with the ADV. The model domain, along with the computational EFDC grid, is shown on this figure, where at the smallest of the telescoping grid, with the smallest grid size roughly in the 4x4 meter scale, ranging up to several tens of meters at distance away from the ferry. There are approximately 34,000 horizontal cells and 5 vertical layers in this EFDC model domain. This slide shows a close-up of the bathymetry used by the EFDC model. You can see from this figure there's a dredged and scoured channel deeper in slip 1, but very distinguishable in slip 2 also. This slide shows some of the details around the various vessels that are being simulated, along with some of the propeller characteristics. Once the vessel and propeller information is obtained, these data are entered into the user interface as shown here. Once the model has been configured, the period of interest is selected, and ship tracks and applied power is determined for each of the ferries. As sediment bed data was not available at the time of the study, sediment transport was not simulated as part of this demonstration. This slide is showing the plan view of a ship track with the velocities once I turn on the animation. The basic size and shape of the vessel is displayed in gray. This is particular vessel is the Walla Walla that we're going to visualize here. And then back behind it, we will see the impact of the propeller momentum on the 3D velocity field in the EFDC hydrodynamics. So as the vessel moves away, you'll see the velocity jet back behind the ship. Starting the animation, the high velocity jet behind the vessel is clearly evident. Then as the vessel tracks on out of the view, the residual velocity field is remaining in the system. You see it as it begins to advect and diffuse up against the shoreline and ultimately dissipate into the sound. Here we're going to have another animation, but in this animation we'll be looking at the subgrid Propwash field calculated at the sediment water interface as the ship leaves the ferry terminal. The subgrid will be shown as a series of colored square dots. Starting the animation, you can see the high magnitude velocity colored more toward the whitish, lightest colors, and then the lower velocities, near zero velocities, are near black. So you can very clearly see that intersection of the jet onto the bottom of the sound. Looking in a little more detail at the ADV data relative to the predicted velocity jet behind the ship, you can see here in this figure the initial position of the velocity jet subgrid along with the ADV locations at the north and south pilings. This slide shows the measured ADV 6-second low-pass filter data as the red line and the predicted velocities as the blue dots. There's generally good correspondence between the timing of the velocity peaks. The magnitude varies and seems to be related to vessel position and wind conditions, which we were not accounting for in the vessel traffic. Also, due to issues around the propeller being located at both the front and the back of the ship, right now we're only simulating the vessel departures where the propeller is located at the back of the ship closer to the ADVs. Same data for the south piling is shown in this slide. Of note is the significantly higher magnitudes associated with the vessel departures than at the north piling, where again the good correspondence generally between the measured ADV data and the predicted velocities. This animation shows the computed bed shear stress associated with the Propwash jet as the vessel departs the ferry terminal. This slide shows the predicted bed shear stress due to the Propwash over the March 18th period. At times, the bed shear stress gets up to over 6 pascals, which is a very significant shear stress and definitely would cause erosion in most sediment beds. In summary, DSI, in partnership with their sponsors, we've developed a robust near-field, far-field coupled Propwash tool that can be used for a range of vessel impacts on engineered structures as well as erosion from the bed. This demonstration of the Propwash tool for the Kingston ferry terminal demonstrates some of the functionality and the capabilities of this new tool. While this new EFDC Plus Propwash tool is very robust, there are more features and capabilities that we're looking to add in the next several months to a year. We're looking at adding multiple propellers on a ship, which address things like the ferry, where there's a single ship has propellers on both ends going 2 different directions. You also have bow thrusters, you have directional propellers that will be added to the Propwash module. In addition, we will look at extending the vessel impact capabilities by looking at underhull acceleration. This is a significant issue when tugs are pushing large ships that are very close, whose hulls are very close to the bottom. And fully implementing bed load in the sediment transport model for both Sedsel J and the more traditional Van Ryn, England Hansen type approach for sediment transport. Bed load due to Propwash shears are already included in both the Van Ryn and the Sedsel J submodels. However, additional testing and evaluation are still needed. And while there is significant capability already within the user interface for track editing and visualization of the Propwash impacts and jets, there is always more room needed for additional analysis and evaluation. Finally, testing. Testing will continue. We'll be looking at additional test cases and flume studies. I appreciate this opportunity to share these developments with you and look forward to your questions.